Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It's myself, George, joined once more by Tayte for another episode of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. And we are, of course, talking Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, even kicks out before we introduce Tayte, a bit behind the scenes. Yes, these are still weekly, but for us, we've not recorded one of these in about 3 weeks. We got so far ahead of schedule, and we're leaving it so late. It's almost like a mini season break, but not for you guys at home. This video is also going to be up this Tuesday. But before we get into all that sort of stuff, Tayte, how are we doing tonight?
Yeah, good. It's been a few years since I've seen Temple of Doom. I'll be honest. I do prefer to rewatch the other two, and I'm not one of those people who will just like watch all the films in a series. If I get into them, I will just pick and choose which ones I prefer to watch. But it was interesting going back and seeing this film, so I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting one. I mean, I'm the same as you. I don't think I've seen this for a few years. I know you work well on Razor Stark, so it's a really fun chat. But we'll catch you up to speed with this one.
Yeah.
But I think last time I saw it was maybe like 2016, 17. I think when what I'm like with franchises, when a film gets announced, I can just hide from a few years. I can just wait, and I've got the patience to then say, okay, I can finally tick X, Y, and Z off my list instead of watching the same franchise again. So it's been really nice to do Indiana Jones, and also not. I always do the trilogy together. Whereas it's nice to see, well, not Twilight Zone the movie, but it's been nice to get these spread out with some other films. But before we get into all that sort of fun stuff, we're going to very quickly go over, obviously, the usual stuff, the socials, comments. So comment your thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Comment your thoughts on Indiana Jones. We're not locked into just this one. You're hyped for the new one. You're not hyped for the new one. Your thoughts on the original three. We're even going to get to the fourth one at some point this year, which we've got a long way away from, and all that kind of stuff. So follow us on there, hit the subscribe button. The Steven Spielberg Retrospective is every single Tuesday. If you like this video, then there is a lot more on the way. We'll be doing this through till November, which is also terrifying to think about. We are in May. It's been 2 months. This is the 9th episode, which is pretty crazy already. So please do all that stuff. And Tayte, where can the people find us about little announcements and all that sort?
People can find us everywhere. So you can find us on Twitter at cinema_savvy. You can find us on Facebook, Cinema Savvy as well, and go onto letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. Also go into the link in the description to pick up a t-shirt or a jumper from TeePublic today.
Absolutely. Everybody, please do that. And as always, we'll kickstart off the Steven Spielberg retrospective with the weekly IMDb plot synopsis. So this is the part of the episode where we formally announce the film. I haven't read this synopsis. I copy and paste it onto the schedule. It's a surprise. Sometimes we get one line, sometimes we get 2 lines, but we've been given another paragraph for this one. So if you're unfamiliar with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, it is as follows. In 1935, Indiana Jones arrives in India, still part of the British Empire, and is asked to find a mystical stone. He then stumbles upon a secret cult committing enslavement and human sacrifices in the catacombs of an ancient palace. That's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? That's the weirdest one today. That's a bit too much, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it kind of tells the plot, but also at the same time, it's very like, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, which I guess is indicative of the film. But at the same time, like, you want to leave a little bit of mystery in there for the actual plot for anyone who kind of stumbles across and goes, "Oh, I want to watch this film. I'll see what the IMDb plot synopsis says." It's a bit of an unusual one.
Yeah, sorry. Speaking of cults and sacrifices, if anyone can hear it, apologies. A neighbour's dog just won't stop barking, and I've realised I've left the window open. So, absolutely abysmal here. With all that stuff, sorry, it's doing. I'm going to mute myself. Tayte, I mean, we didn't get you on for Razor Stark. Obviously, you weren't well. So, what I'm going to ask you, not just the memories of Temple of Doom, first time you saw it, but just Indiana Jones as a whole, your background with that. I'm really curious to know.
I really liked Indiana Jones growing up. It was one of those film series that you can just kind of stick on and just kind of like just enjoy the adventure. And I always enjoyed kind of watching the films as a kid. Funny enough, beforehand, when we were talking about this film in particular, I said that this one was, oh, how did I word it? It wasn't my favorite, but it was the one I remembered the most fondly. It's the one that kind of it kind of brought the most emotion out of me and stuff like that when I was a kid growing up. I think I had a connection with Short Round, and I had a connection with the characters and had a connection with the story, and always had really fond memories of this film. But personally, like, without going into much, my favorite of the kind of 4 films is Last Crusade. Then I'd probably put Raiders, then I put this film, then I put the other one. Which if you've watched our drink along to that, then you'll know kind of our opinions on that anyway.
I mean, that was the first time I saw it. It was like a live reaction, and I didn't drink that night either. I kept sober for that experience, and it's not as bad as people say, but I understand. That's the thing. I understand where it all comes from. Yeah, the history of this Temple of Doom. Well, this is actually going to be quite interesting. Actually, discussing this review tonight. I've always had a weird Indiana Jones ranking. Not that you can't really rank them per se. Like, not that we need a rankings video, but it's just 4 is at the bottom for everyone. I'm sorry. Like, even if you like it, it's still at the bottom. And mine was always 3, 2, 1. It was like reverse. Like, again, watching them, and what I found really interesting is watching this today, going back to this, a few years since I've seen it. Now, I do want to say, I do rank this trilogy very high. So for me to say like it's like this, it's not like like Bond where you can get a clanger in amidst it, or like a Marvel where you don't care. These are like 3 that to me are on like a pretty even level, right at the top of what I enjoy for films. But I was surprised that Temple of Doom today, I still really enjoyed it. I still really enjoy this film, but I had such a good time with Raiders of the Ark a few weeks ago. This is the first time, but like, yeah, like I'm starting to come around. Well, not starting to come around, but I was like, when people say Raiders is one of the best ones ever made, I see that, and I think watching Temple of Doom, I did notice the decline in the quality of the film. Now, I say decline; it's not like I still love this film. I still think it's a fantastic film. I still think it's a better blockbuster action film than 90% of people could ever dare make. But Raiders of the Ark is just up there, and Last Crusade, when we get to it, same as you, that's my favorite out of the 3, always has been. It's impossible to look past that. So it was a really interesting viewing experience today, and I'm kind of curious to you as well. Like, have you ever like changed your thoughts on them, like as time's gone by, or has it always been quite similar to when you're younger?
It's changed, I'll say that, because I really did prefer this film or enjoy this film a lot more when I was younger, and upon rewatch this time round, I'm not sure if it's just because I came straight in from watching Raiders. I'm not sure if it's because I'm watching a lot of Spielberg films, kind of going through his catalog and everything like that, and you're able to see how he's able to develop as a filmmaker. But if we're looking at it from the Spielberg perspective, I'd say this was a step down. I don't think the direction is as good here as it has been in previous films. I don't think it's completely his style, and I don't know really how to describe that. But you miss out on a lot of things which you saw in Raiders. A lot of the magic, I would say, about the film is lost on me as an adult, which I find it's a little bit disappointing. In my mind, I've always seen this film as the family film, which is really interesting when we get into the production stuff later on, because I never knew any of that. But I've always seen this as, oh, it's the one with Short Round, it's the one with Willie. It's like Harrison Ford's the dad in this one. It's a family film, and I've always seen it as that. Compared to the other films where it's more like an adventure. I know he goes on an adventure with dad in the 3rd one, but like it's always seemed in that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm rambling here, but yeah.
No, I'm with you 100%, especially when we get started. I mean, we'll get to the characters. We might as well talk about some of the production stuff now. Now, obviously, a bit of, not just, well, this is behind the scenes, but we're probably going to have a discussion near the end about how this film holds up today. We're not going to sit there and just bombard it and try and cancel. We don't do that sort of thing. But obviously, there is a discussion to be had, and it actually come up quite well. So, just talking some of the behind the scenes. I mean, this was new to me. It was originally called Temple of Death, which sounds far too dark.
That would have warranted the ratings.
Yeah, like Temple of Doom's like that's a fantastic name as a title, as a put it on the poster. Temple of Death's like, whoa, like can you really do that? Like Doom's got that sort of not charm to it, but that's like come in and see what's to play. Death's like, whoa, like don't take the kids, keep them away.
Yeah,
and that's what I found really curious about this. But what we'll actually do, we'll kickstart like last time on Raiders. We get to talk about George Lucas, and I guess we can say it's still Star Wars month. So it's the 2 Indiana Jones reviews have tied in really nicely to doing loads of Star Wars stuff. Quick plug, Kenobi coming out this Friday. Excited for that. Nothing to do with Indiana Jones though. You never know though; he might pop up one day. What I guess is worth mentioning that obviously we know this film has a darker tone, and this was really fascinating when you spoke about it being like the family film for you. I'd always seen this as that sort of darker, not stepbrother, but the one thing that always surprised me, and I didn't know this for years, that this film was a prequel. Not that it really matters. This doesn't come in and say, "Guess we'll set this up for what we've already seen." Like,
Yeah.
it's the kind of prequel where it's just literally a year. It'd be like saying that Goldfinger's set before Thunderball. It doesn't change anything of how you view these films and what the films are. It's a really weird thing, but just talking Spielberg and Lucas at the time, they were both struggling their personal lives, and they believe that this film, certainly how Spielberg spoke about it in the years that followed, this film is one that has a darker tone and is one that they not don't speak of, but I think the film they have a lot of regrets with and feel that they pushed the envelope, did things they weren't fully committed with and didn't enjoy as much, and that kind of stems over, I guess, even with Lawrence Kasdan, who read the pitch treatment, however, and he didn't want to be associated to the film, which is quite a statement from Lawrence Kasdan, who just done Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Empire Strikes Back with George Lucas. So, what I'd kind of speak to this, like even before the main thing, did you ever really notice that tonal change? Because I've never felt the tonal change too much until reading this stuff. It's more the culture change, which is why I feel this film has a bigger effect.
Yeah, it's an odd one because the tonal change upon rewatch, I don't remember it being that dark of a film. I always remember the Kali Ma kind of sequence and that being quite brutal, but like I always saw it as not even cartoon violence, but I don't know if it's that innocent, the kind of level of violence that you watch as a kid when you're watching through these films and you're already used to it because you would have seen Raiders and there's a couple of scenes where there is some violence in there and it's kind of played off as jokes, just like the kind of the plane sequence where he's punching him and then he goes into the plane, or the kind of the sword fight that never happened that finally happens in this film. Like, it's all played off for jokes, whereas this film, that it's very difficult to avoid the jokes. It's more of like, oh, the violence actually needed to happen in this one. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, it's quite unusual, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, I never found it as much, and I think when I sort of mentioned the culture change, then I mean a lot of that stuff is, I guess, a very heavy point, and obviously with this film being almost 40 years old now, not that we're saying it's a different time. I don't even think it's a different time. I haven't been blunt because this is a period piece, even in 1984. This is set in 35. Actually, hold on, is that a good point? Is this 35 to 84? That's 39 years. We're almost as close to we're just on the verge of Temple of Doom being closer to us than the actual year it's set in, which is quite scary.
wow.
2 more years, people, then it will be the way around. But no, what I kind of thought of this, I mean, like I said, when I was younger, I love this film. I still love this film. I love it today. It's some of that stuff stands out a bit more, and inherently, I don't feel the film is darker to me as a viewer. However, I've always naturally been into stuff like that a little bit more, which maybe says more about my history with films than anything. But I came into Indiana Jones not quite late, but I was 12 when I saw all these, so I had quite a nurtured understanding. I think had I been about 6, 7 years old, I think Temple of Doom would be the one out of the three I struggle with the most. Now we'll get to Short Round in a bit because I know we spoke a bit before we went live about that as well. But Short Round is the big moment for the kids viewing at home who they line with and have the enjoyment with, and I think he's so needed in a film like this that for the younger audience it might take away from some of the other stuff. That's a weird spell, but when you've got
Yeah.
like child slavery, cults, like I mean, they're
Yeah.
not Satanists; they're worshiping a god, but ripping the hearts out. I love the heart scene. I've always loved the scene,
Yeah.
and Kalimar and all that sort of stuff. I can see why that would be inherently darker, and I guess with the whole Lucas and Spielberg stuff, so sort of tying back to it, does a lot of that depend on they view this as serials from the sort of 30s? Were those serials always lighthearted as well, and was it their personal lives that really detracted? Because it inherently is very dark when it's laid out. The premise it is a lot darker than I think it feels.
Yeah, yeah, and especially when like stuff that like I didn't learn about until we came on for this review, like the film led to the creation of like PG-13 in America. It was censored in the UK until 12 was created, as in the rating as well. Like that's interesting. You could say this film is groundbreaking for those areas alone. the fact that it was so popular that people had to go and see this film, they had to do the ratings just so they would get more people into the seats and stuff like that, is fascinating. But also, it's one of those films where kind of back in the day, it would have walked the line between what was
Yeah.
kind of viewable for kind of younger audiences because it is a family orientated film, but also it has that brutal violence in there to kind of counteract it and twist it. I do feel like Short Round might be the most important character in this film because he's that innocence in there. He's a fun character. Like I said, I was connected with him. I think he's my favorite character from this film, actually. I'm so glad he's getting more recognition kind of now with kind of more films coming out, especially Everything Everywhere All at Once. I absolutely adored him in that film. He was fantastic. So it's really nice to kind of see that, yeah, it's moving on.
No, absolutely, and yeah, we'll get to that. I mean, that film's
Yeah.
just unbelievable, and we
Mm.
really hope that we do get to see him in some more stuff. And I want to actually you mentioned the age ratings. I mean, let's talk
Yeah.
this. I mean, we know that over here, for me and you growing up, we had 12
Mhm.
A's. We were very lucky we had 12 A's.
Mhm.
I've got an older sister, about 4 years older, who 12 A's introduced like the year she turned 12, so she was fuming. But it's like I don't know how much you remember. Obviously, Spider-Man was the big one over here because it was the whole logic of hold on, the kids can't see a Spider-Man film, and obviously it came down to the Green Goblin death scene, which
Mm.
I don't know, wasn't scarred by the age of 6.
No.
But obviously, across, like everything's 12A now. And what I feel fascinating with age ratings is like the history of it. That, I'd never looked at origins of PG. Not that I'd want to, but, when did these ratings come in? Why do these ratings come in? That's what I've always found interesting. I'm pretty sure there were rumors about a 15A this year when Batman came out, because the Batman over here was dubbed like, how is this a 15? Should
Yeah.
Batman be a 15? And I think it should have been. But certainly, if you wanted to experiment, Batman was probably a fair way of experimenting, a 15A maybe, or at least
Yeah, I'd say
at
that.
least an
Yeah.
A point of like a 10 to, I don't know. We're not the BBFC, but if they're listening anywhere, we'd be really curious for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be those films that push those boundaries. I feel like this is one of those films that kind of not only tested the boundaries, but obviously it pushed it. It pushed it far enough.
Yeah, 100% that. And as well, with this being American, I just, the whole PG thing, because I always think PG's been bigger there than here. Like,
Yeah,
again, would have been the same for you, like with your parents, likely. It didn't really matter what rating a film was as a kid. PG, all that.
yeah.
There's no difference between a PG and U for me. I'm sorry. There is no difference between a PG
Well,
and
no,
U.
PG has cartoon violence. You does not.
But again, it's not going to make any difference to a 3-year-old
Yeah,
watching at home, and that's what's always aggravated me when I was younger. And Revenge of the Sith, talking Star Wars stuff, all as we have done this month, that was a 12A, and that was the big thing. That, oh my god, a Star Wars film is a 12A. Why? And I'm like, well, he's gonna turn into. I remember that as a kid on
yeah.
teletext, reading that on teletext. That's how old we probably sound now. And obviously, you watch the film, it's like, well, yeah, he just literally got chopped up, set on fire, and you got to see that, and that probably would scare some kids. But
Mm.
Star Wars aside, yeah, it is pretty sane. But if we want to talk about some of stuff, we haven't mentioned India yet. Obviously, we'll get to a little bit at the end
Yeah,
of the how the film split. I didn't know it was originally banned in India, which I'm not
I can
surprised
see
with. Yeah,
that.
and they wanted to film there, and they weren't allowed to film on the palaces, which I also understand.
Mm.
And I think a little tidbit I found, which was quite interesting, is that the the dinner scene was always dubbed a joke. It was meant to be. This is what Spielberg said, and the producer, that scene was a joke on the British people. The British Empire's there, like checking in essentially. It was a joke on them that they expect these people to eat these kinds of weird foods they never would. They're playing a joke on them.
Mm.
It's a very weird explanation because it definitely doesn't come across as a joke. I'm not
No.
even saying from sizing, like even as when I was younger, I was like, wow, like there's eyeballs in the soup, and at the age of like 12, I think you wouldn't know how potentially insulting that is. But
Mm.
just going off this film's background with India, what happened at the time, and I'd be very curious to know how I describe it. With a lot of like Asian Americans have said that when they were younger, they were all called short rounds and stuff like that. I would imagine you probably had something similar with Indian people after this film came out or something. Now I can talk about experience from where I live. It's a very sort of a multicultural area. I'm in Warwickshire. I'm not going to give our town away from that. It's pretty big. And I'm very comfortable with different cultures, but it's always been interesting getting the insights from other people. And in an area where there's a lot of Sikh people as well, with one of the biggest temples I think in the world actually, which is around the corner from me. That was a big thing at school where that temple was being built, because there were always people making references to Temple of Doom, which is like insanely racist.
Yeah.
And at the age of 13, you wouldn't know how bad that sort of thing was, but obviously a lot of these did. So it's really interesting as, again, we get old enough to realize this. And I think what that ties back with is the whole Spielberg and Lucas thing. Like, Spielberg, he's not disowned this film. I'm pretty sure he said, like, this is the one film, like, he either regrets or the film that he wishes he did differently. And he's literally just said that everything was wrong. I think they had to rush the film as well because E.T. was so big. They couldn't retain Spielberg for all three unless they acted quick, which is also really interesting. So I don't know if I'm waffling at this point, but it is.
No,
there's a very interesting
yeah.
discussion to be had on this, I think.
It's a very good point, because I can absolutely see why this would be banned in India at release. And also it's from kind of, I don't know, this is from a British perspective, which is probably not the best perspective given the kind of track record with India that we've had in the past with colonialism and stuff like that. But all I'm thinking when, like, they were asking, oh, we want to film in your temples and this is the scene we want to do, is big American studio, we can do what we want kind of vibes that I'm getting from just kind of that statement alone.
And Lucas as well, head of Lucasfilm, kind of independent to a point. His rule was, I do what I want, especially as being the guy that did Star Wars.
Yeah. So I can completely understand that. And no, the film has not aged well at all. And it was one of the things which I was a little bit disappointed upon kind of watching it. And it shouldn't detract from the film. We talk a lot about films that have kind of products of their time and stuff like that, but it does come to a stage where you do have to reflect on it and go, actually, the effect that it could have had on people at the time, and we can't just judge it for being a film of its time. We have to kind of hold it to the standards that we have now. All of the other Indiana Jones films don't have this same problem, or if they do, it's not to the same extent. It's not to kind of the higher extent that this film had for those scenes, because I do remember these scenes kind of all the way through. And you've got to think about how it portrays an entire country and the people who are from there. It is very offensive, and it can be taken in offense as well to some people. So it's worth kind of discussing and stuff like that. Of course, this film hasn't been cancelled or anything like that. People don't really talk about this film when they talk about Indiana Jones anymore. They rather talk about the one that they hated. 1, 3, and 4. This is the one that's kind of forgotten about, and maybe that's a good thing that it's kind of not remembered in kind of the same area as the others. But at the same time, like, it's interesting. It's quite funny because the last review we were on, we were also talking about problems on a Spielberg film. But it's an interesting one to talk about.
No, I think 100% of that, and as well, obviously we know the fifth one's coming out next year. And I'd imagine there will be, around the time that film comes out, when a lot of people do go and rewatch those films, as I probably will do anyway, I'd imagine that will be discussed a lot more. And I, as you said, rightfully so, with that. And I think what is also worth adding for people, we're not kicking off. Like I said, we both enjoyed this film. Obviously, we can have issues. We can have issues with the film and enjoy a film, which is also a really important thing to say. When you look at Indiana Jones 1 and 3, when the villains are Nazis in those two, and then in the fourth one, the villains are, the Russians during the Cold War, and in this one, it's, okay, I understand that they aren't the palace, but when the Maharaj is involved, who is, the hierarchy involved in this cult and the slavery, and you've got the white savior theme, which is, even when I was younger, like, not that I knew what white savior was, but it was so random, like, oh, Indiana Jones randomly appeared, he's going to save this whole town. Like, as a kid, that's like, yeah, that's cool. Like, that's cool, he's going to save everyone because he's Indiana Jones. As you're older, it's like, again, the white savior stereotype's far more blatant now. But I think, again, not cancelling this film at all, but the mindset for me of, like, again, for Spielberg and Lucas over the years to have sort of quietly dismissed this film, I think says quite a bit about their reflection in their older age. I know that posts, I mean, we'll get to it in a couple of months' time. Obviously, Schindler's List was one of the most important films of Spielberg's career, not just as a filmmaker, but in his personal life. Having kids pre that, I think, with Hook as well. He's a very different director now to then. And I think even in E.T., I know you weren't able to make that one, he spoke about working with Kathleen Kennedy, that Kathleen Kennedy was able to not educate him, but he said working with Kathleen Kennedy was one of the most important producers he ever had because he was able to essentially get new viewpoints and understandings. And I think it's a conversation to be had, and it kind of has to be. You can't just skirt around it for something like this. And it's like, we're not dismissing this film, but we're just pointing out things that do need to be pointed out in a retrospective. That and I think it does hamper this film a little bit more now compared to when I was younger, because I am aware of the issues.
Yeah, and especially now that we've got the internet and there's a lot more open discussions about these films that have been in the past, and a lot of people have called out films on various different reasons and stuff like that. But the jokes made in this film do just come off as tacky cheap shots when you look at it in a kind of a modern day perspective. It doesn't detract from the fact that it's still an enjoyable family adventure fun film, and of course people would have enjoyed it at the time. People wouldn't have understood kind of the impact they would have had on people, like you said, people being called short round just because of their race. It's not good, it is racism, but it's something that we need to discuss it now, kind of as a culture, and like discussing this film. But we also do need to appreciate that the film was made very well. It's a good film for people to watch, and people can still enjoy it. It's an unusual grey area, but it's worthy of discussion either way. One thing I want to bring up, slightly changing the subject, is the performances in this film.
Yeah,
because I think this is Harrison Ford's. Is it his weakest performance out of the four? I feel like he does more in the fourth one from an acting perspective, playing the tired old man, than he does in this film, because he just looks tired in this film.
Oh, I'd say it's his weakest out of the trilogy, but I think that's only because Raiders is so raw as a film. It's nothing like we've seen with, especially with Harrison. And Last Crusade is just genius. Again, that's more so down to the father-son relationship and his performance with Sean Connery. So I feel where this film is, and I've read some really interesting stuff in the past. I can't remember what article it was, but there was a really good article I read once on Temple of Doom, that with it being a prequel, that Indiana Jones isn't the same character as Raiders. And I almost turn the article off. I'm going to be blunt. But I kind of read it was really fascinating. They argued the point that because Temple of Doom is where he sees the what do you call it, witchcraft? What would you call the heart thing? Is it witchcraft?
I don't know. Like it's just cultism, or is it like it isn't even voodoo? It's like
I guess no, it's voodoo. No, voodoo's the correct term actually, because they do got the voodoo doll, and what the article I read, again, this is years ago, so forgive me for not knowing sources or anything. But it kind of spoke about that this is the film where Indiana Jones experiences essentially that's not extraterrestrial, that's the fourth film. Again, the not normalities to then make him into the same character as Raiders. Now, I disagree inherently that he 180s as a character across this film, but I do believe in a lot of the mindset of the article that this film does change. I mean, this is where it's interesting as a prequel, because we spoke about that, it doesn't operate as a let's set up everything for the next one. But certainly I can see a shift in character tone. And again, to when we get back to the third film, completely different tone, different cast, characters, everything. And it's a really interesting one of Harrison's performance, because I don't think it's bad at all. I don't think it can compare to 1 or 3.
Yeah.
And then 4's tricky because he is older in 4 and he can't do some of the stuff from 1 to 3. And the next year we're going to have probably more comparisons to 4 than the first 3 in terms of Harrison's performance, maybe.
Actually, I will possibly retract my statement that it's worse than 4, because there are some scenes which he actually acts quite well in reflection, like the scene where he's taken over by the spirit, and he's kind of like with that sweaty look on his face, completely glass-eyed and everything like that.
And he's
But
James Bond at the start of the film. Sorry, I just want to say that I've
yeah,
always. It's not meant to be a homage to Bond, but the white suit, the
yeah,
red,
yeah, yeah.
come on, like Sean
I,
Connery in
I
Bond,
do.
and then they literally went and got him.
Yeah, I just feel like in this film, his acting performance in a lot of the scenes is a lot more tired, and he does fit into that kind of he's the dad role. He has to look after Short Round, like Willie's screaming all the time. It's kind of like he's the one who's like the kind of the cynic of that entire kind of scenario because he's like, oh, I've got to save them again, kind of thing. But he's playing that in every single scene, which does get repetitive as the film goes on. It's an interesting one.
No, I definitely see that as well, and I'd be curious to see what other people think of it because there's definitely a point
Mm.
to be made in there. You mentioned Willie Scott. Let's talk
Hmm.
about played by Kate Capshaw, who would then obviously go on to marry Spielberg down the line. There are always rumors that he fancied her, so he cast her, and they
Mm.
were together. Then they split up. He married, but then he obviously married her as time went by.
Hmm.
So it's a really interesting one. I know that Willie splits a lot of people as well. I've got to say that like the character is very divisive. I've never minded her, but I have always understood so many people's issues with her. But kind of what you were saying, say the family stuff, I think she works for the film's dynamics, so I've never minded it as much. Also, there's only 3 films, so it doesn't stand out as bad as potentially it could.
It put me off rewatching the film, I'll be honest. As in like whilst watching it. I don't remember her character being like that. I remember her character being a bit kind of squeamish and squealy and stuff like that, but I don't remember her screaming in every single scene, which she pretty much did in this film. It was really distracting in the film to just have her basically her only reaction is a scream reaction, and the one reaction where she doesn't do a scream, she faints. It's like she has absolutely no emotion other than I need to scream right now. Um, it is detracting from the film, I will be honest, and it's kind of the one thing that's now going to stick in my mind. If I want to go back to this film, I'll have to kind of think to myself, you have to deal with Willie screaming for 2 hours, and it wasn't fun to watch because of that. It's almost like I'm waiting for the scenes where she isn't involved or she's kind of like less screamy, and it's not as strong a character as there was in the first film. It's not a strong female character in the role. It's kind of going back to that stereotype of kind of damsel in distress and always in distress, which I wasn't a big fan of. But for the action adventure genre, it works perfectly. It's very cheesy. It works for the time. So maybe it's just kind of a modern perception thrown onto that, or maybe it's because my own personal taste. But either way, I didn't enjoy her character.
I think as well because she's such a stark contrast to Marion, who we
Mm,
know not just because the 4th film is long term. Like Marion was always the one for him, and obviously in the 3rd one we have Elsa, who we know is the villain all along.
yeah.
Um, it's one of them where it stands out even more. And again, I get everyone's issue, and I think as well the whole Kate Capshaw stuff. I think any actress would have ended up being the same performance. I don't want to say it's a hard role. That sounds really unfair and
It's
dismissive of
very
her. But
difficult without completely rewriting the character because the dynamic they've got set up in the film is she is the screamy mum. You've got the kid who's actually the level-headed one in this one, which is crazy. But like it's the way they've set up the film. So that would come down to the writing, and you'd have to completely change that before you even
yeah,
changed whether like Kate Capshaw's performance. I haven't seen her in much other stuff, so I can't actually kind of say whether she is a fantastic actress or not. But like you know,
yeah. I mean, going off in a polite segue to talking about who probably is my favorite character in this film,
mm,
Short Round. Now we spoke a little bit earlier, but I've been wanting to say this chat. Kei Hu Kwan is the one that plays him. Obviously, I really hope you've all seen him recently in
I
Everything
hope so as
Ever All
well.
at Once. We're plugging that.
Yeah.
Please support that film. Go and see that
I'll,
film.
yeah.
I have to
I'll,
really ironically say
yeah.
I dubbed it the film of the year, like Northman, for a week. Um, the film of the year comes out tomorrow by the time this video comes out. That's all I can say. That's all I'm going to say.
It's
But
still my film of the year at this point. I'll put it that
yes,
way.
and I'll tell you this: it's still one of maybe the best sci-fi, one of the best sci-fi films this century so far. And it's only 20 years.
Yeah.
But Short Round, loved him when I was younger. Now I saw the Goonies when I was very old. I didn't like. I say very old. I saw it when I was like 20. When was the World Cup? 2018. I saw it during the World Cup, so it was really random. But I was 22, and I was far too old to have seen the Goonies the first time, age of 22. And he's in the Goonies, but I never seen him in anything else. And before we get into, I really want to say this because this was like devastating to find out about. He essentially quit acting in the like early noughties, and it was because he couldn't get any roles offered to him that just weren't stereotypical Asian roles. And it wasn't just because he'd played Short. And I apologize, I've forgotten his Goonies character name. I've only seen it once. Data, yes, that's it. Sorry, Data. And you know, he sort of left acting behind because he just couldn't get offered roles or auditions that weren't stereotypes, and he actually went on to do a lot of stunt coordination, a lot of I think assistant directorial stuff, a lot of behind the scenes, of behind the camera. So just as a side piece, like I've been excited to see this film anyway because it's the Spielberg retrospective, and he gets to do Indiana Jones. But when Everything Ever All at Once came out, I was like, oh my god, like we're like a week or two away from doing Temple of Doom, and I'm so excited to talk about him now because it's really sad reading about his career. And I think and this isn't just because he hadn't been anything for sort of so long, he is to me the best character in Everything Ever All at Once. He is the emotional heartbeat of the film, and he is one of the characters that sort of made me cry watching it. His character arc, and I'm more than happy to admit I cried watching that film. So yeah, like to sideways into a very quick hype for Everything Ever All at Once. Did that kind of do anything for you watching this as well in the rewatch? Because it did a lot for me.
It made me appreciate his performance more, just seeing kind of where he's ended up now, and the fact that he's had such a humongous gap, like no films between 2002 and 2021, and that's such a long kind of stay outside of cinema. And I think his performance in this is fantastic. I know that I've heard some people with opinions on this film say he's a bit like the Ewoks in Star Wars. It's like the cute, cuddly thing, or it's like the kind of the thing to detract away from the story. And it's given that same kind of area of kind of discussion sometimes. But I think he's absolutely key to the plot. He's a fantastic character. He plays him really fun, and he's relatable for kids.
Yeah,
just like the Ewoks.
100%. I think to me he's the emotional heartbeat of this film. He's not just the comic relief, but as you said quite clearly, he is there in this for the kids. And we sort of spoke about the tone earlier, the subject matter of this film. This isn't an easy watch, like child slavery, like in Hollywood. And I just love him. Like when we first meet him in the car, the fact like he drives a car and he's like, how was he meant to be? I think he was 12 at the time the film came out, maybe.
Is he meant to be 8 or 9 or something?
He's meant to be 8 or 9, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's got the little boxes on his feet to drive the car with as well. He's just so much fun, and I just think he's really funny. And I'm gonna say I don't think it's the script. In truth, I actually think it's his performance that he's naturally just so funny. And I think going back to Harrison Ford, his best moments in this film are actually with Kayun, and that's just because I feel that there's a chemistry there. And again, you know, not sort of dissing the fourth one. I've only seen it once, but he should have been back. I would love them to find a way to get him in the fifth one if there's any reshoots to be done. It's probably very unlikely, but I think now Everything Ever is All I Want Is to come out. We get this with certain actors when they've been away, and you get this insane first film back. Because I think he was in a film that came out last year, like a supporting role. But this was filmed, I think, pre or during COVID. So this has been in the pipeline for quite a while, and I just think it's so great to see him. He was on like one of the, I always forget which one, Jimmy Kimmel or fan. He was on one of them recently, promoting the film, and it's just great to see him back. And I think watching Everything Ever All at Once at the cinema was like, he's got such a unique accent as well. Like I mean, I know that he's sort of lived in America and that as well, but his voice, it isn't just the accent. Like he's got a, it's not as in sorry his Vietnamese accent. It's like his actual accent's like it's I think it's quite high pitched as well. But he's just likable and he's a great guy. Like you see in interviews, I think he's done conventions for a few years as well. He'd already been on the convention circuit before they were getting big. He's just so likable and charming, and I think he deserved a lot better. Not from this film,
Yeah,
from Hollywood, from the
I
industry,
agree with that.
and I really hope we get that back because all my favorite scenes. And again, I think we've said this before on so many videos. You get child actors, and I always hated the one in Terminator 2.
Mm.
And there are some that you might love as a kid and dislike as an adult. Short Round's charm's never gone away. To me, he's still fundamentally like one of my favorite Indiana Jones characters of all of them. And yeah, I think a lot of the story ties into him in this. And what was fascinating to read is that apparently he had even more lines, but Harrison Ford kept using his one-liners, which I thought was incredible. Because I don't remember that many one-liners in truth, which makes me think that Harrison just nicked them and Short Round would have probably delivered them better.
Probably. I'm just reading up on kind of he's listed down as an 11-year-old psychic, so he is 11 in the film. But he was cast after his brother auditioned for the role, actually. So his brother also auditioned for it, and Spielberg really liked his personality, and they had some improvised scenes with Harrison Ford, including the card scene, which I'll be honest, I'm rethinking that scene over in my head. That does seem quite improvised, which is really nice that they were able to do that, and they were able to kind of come up with that chemistry. So yeah, I absolutely adore his character, and I would love to see him used in more film and everything like that. I'd actually like to see him get some recognition. I know
Yes.
that it's very early on in the film kind of year
No, I'm with
to be
you. I know where
saying
I know where you're going to. He's
saying
got to be
immediately
campaigning for
about
supporting actor.
awards. Put him down for supporting actor, Ke Huy Quan, for supporting actor in the Oscars or any awards show, because his performance in that film was fantastic.
Yeah, campaign it 100%. I think they will. Again, it's very early days, but it's a conversation worth having, and the way that film's come across, definitely the best multiversal film you'll see this year, which is what a lot of people keep saying too.
I mean, I'll be honest, it'd be very difficult to top it. Full stop. It's phenomenal.
I'm so excited for everyone to see Top Gun. That's all I'm going to say. Like, picture the wildest hype you've seen for Top Gun, and like times it by 10, and it still goes past that. Like that's how good that film is. But yeah, sorry to also send to a Top Gun review.
We're reviewing so many.
Oh yeah, I don't even. How do we go past Short Run? Like, I feel like I want to say more about Short Run. But sorry, one more thing I wanted to add.
Yes.
The whole child slavery thing. I think that helps Short Run's character in the sense that we sort of see him leading the revolts. And you get the sort of the great moment when he pushes the ladder over, jumps up the rope, and again, it goes to that. I don't think there's ever been a better director than Steven Spielberg at directing like young actors, and I think going off Twilight Zone as well, knowing what happened on that set, fundamentally is so wrong. It also stands out because Spielberg has had a history working with young actors, and why it would disgust him and everybody involved. And if you haven't seen the review, we've not hyped it too much because it's pretty uncomfortable for me and Tate. If you don't know the story, we won't sort of go into it too much. But yeah, I don't think anyone works with young actors better than Spielberg. And it's just amazing to see him in this. And again, it holds up. And maybe I was tempted, like, do I rewatch The Goonies? Like, and it has a young Josh Brolin in. Different conversation, but again, it's because of seeing everything ever all at once, go and see it at the cinemas. But moving aside from the characters, I know I've not put them in as such, but do you want to talk about the villains much, or just the actual, the sort of the cult of it all? Because
I mean, I'll be honest,
I always liked it, but there's not really much to it. It just looks cool.
So forgettable. Apart from the whole Kali Ma thing, they're so forgettable. I can't even remember if they even mentioned their names in the films, like of the actual villains. I know we've got the young prince who's in charge of the temple. You've got the big guy who rips hearts out. It's very difficult with this film because obviously they name the characters in the credits and stuff like that, but I do not remember their names being kind of like mentioned at any point during the film, which never helps with characters, or at least making them memorable. I think the villains are there for the purpose of Indy needs something in the way, not because the villains add anything to the story at all. Like the whole Kali Ma scene is cool from that perspective, with the heart being ripped out and someone being kind of dipped into molten lava. I like that. That's cool. Very creepy, very good. Apart from that, they are wasted in this film. And I feel like a lot more development would have been needed for them, or just give them a little bit more backstory, than just kind of like, was it one, maybe two lines of dialogue that didn't really spell out what their motivations are, other than they've been taken over by the evil spirit. It's such a kind of weak backstory for characters, just to kind of allow Indy to go and do his cool thing.
And I think going off what you just there as well, it kind of makes me go back to Indie 1, I guess 3 as well, what I said earlier. Because they're Nazis, that's all you need to say. Why are they evil? Well, they're playing Nazis. Okay, that's fine. We don't need to develop that.
It becomes
Whereas
very
in
difficult when you
this
say
one,
they're Indian cultists.
yeah, like, and again, it digs that hole deeper, and there's just never enough there. And when you get that table, like everyone at that table's at the, is at the stuff underground. Yeah, I said there's some really cool stuff. And also, I'll say this, I know it wasn't in Spielberg's Twilight Zone part, but the fire pit where the heart goes in was a lot like the segment 3 on Twilight Zone, with the kid and the weird magical powers. Again, that was Joe Dante that did that part.
Yeah.
I just want to flag that part. I was watching, oh yeah, like tying into previous entries. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's talk something we always enjoy. John Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, we'll speak about some scenes later. I'm sure the Mind Chase is going to be right up there, but he got nominated for an Oscar for this film, again, rightfully so. It's John Williams, of course, he gets nominated for an Oscar. He should. I don't think I don't want to say his score not as good. It's really unfair. The score is phenomenal in this film. I think it's perfect, and I think again, with this being a Spielberg retrospective and joking each week, we get the John Williams segment. We speak about the wonder, the joy, the fun, the action, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. It's John Williams, I think, it's like heart that we get to listen to. That is the beat of that in this score, and even like when Short Round pops up. And sorry, another short thing. I was trying to actually make this comparison to when being kids. I always compared Short Round to Anakin Skywalker.
From
really episode, episode 1, not.
I was going to say
very different Anakin, but just I think
killed them all.
Like, because God, can you imagine Short Round if he became the villain for Indiana Jones 5? That'd be insane. Like young Anakin, I think again it's just like this charming young kid he's actually quite funny and gifted and a lot of fun, and I always saw that.
Are you saying the Minecart Chase is like the
pod racing? I was actually watching it like pod racing today. Like it's just so much fun, and I know I've not been to Disneyland since I was like 11, like the Paris ones, which is pretty crap. I've never even been to the prop ones in America. There was like an Indiana Jones ride and we didn't go on it, and it was it's just John Williams' score just makes it. It's the little beats that come in for the characters, and what I would say, like for film set in India that we sort of speak about some issues of the cultural stuff, we don't have like generic like Punjabi music, like Indian music, which I'm just thinking on the spot. I've not written this down in my notes, but I'm just sat to say like we haven't had any of that. I'm just trying to like replay the film in my head. And not to sit here and say Williams knew, none of that nonsense, but that's just me thinking.
Was there anything during the dinner scene?
There must have been, maybe. I think there's like fun and engaging score, but that's always to go with Willie and like discovering the awful food. Now I know that the scenes at the start, you get very much like Oriental style music, which I've got no problem with, and you get that great opening song, which I haven't spoken about yet. But yeah, like there's not me, is it? Someone comment if I'm wrong, and I've literally just discovered that in my head, which I think is actually makes that discussion a bit more interesting. That John Williams had nothing to do with, because that's such an easy stereotype to reinforce as well that could go so wrong.
No, I'd say well, John Williams always does a fantastic score. That's just a given. But I think something that is just magical with the Indiana Jones kind of series in general is he always makes it seem like it's an adventure, which is really difficult sometimes to get with film scores. And I know I wasn't on for Raiders, so I'm able to at least talk about all of the films as a whole, which is really nice. Because with this film, I didn't really pay much attention to the score. I just knew the adventure was happening, and the score helped along with that. I know that's exactly the same case with kind of the first film. I think I remember the score from the first film a bit more because it's kind of the iconic score. It's the introduction of all of the themes and everything like that comes with it. But with this film, every single scene felt elevated just with that kind of background noise that was going on to help it along. Especially that minecart scene in the mines and stuff like that. It really kicks in, it really swings in. And you've always got kind of those hero moments where they have kind of leitmotif coming back for the main theme and everything like that. So it's always fun kind of listening into a John Williams score. And this is one where kind of takes elements from the first film that are needed to bring across, and it just kind of adds to them with the new characters and adds to them with the kind of adventure and new scenes, which is really nice.
No, I'm with you on that, and it's what I said earlier as well, that sometimes you don't notice the score because it is helping the adventure, and ultimately that is the purpose of a score to go with it. There is an adventure to be had, and you need the score that bumps up that It's such an integral part of Indiana Jones. I think the score, almost to Star Wars' level, that you need that score to go with it. And yes, you can say about almost any soundtrack if you really wanted to, but there's a lot of films where sort of silence can be a mighty adversary for a quality of film. But in this, you need that whimsical thing that's not too dark and too dull or depressing. That being said, let's speak about some of it, contextually to 1984. Let's go over, as we always do, the box office and the Oscars. $331 million worldwide off a $28 million budget. Obviously, phenomenal numbers.
I mean, I'll put it this way once again. I'm shocked this was done on a $28 million budget, just straight away.
Yeah, 100% with you on that. It could have even been more, knowing George Lucas. And at the time it came out, this went on to be the 10th highest grossing film of all time. Just to put people in a bit of comparisons to the scale of it at the time of its release. And Oscars-wise, nowhere near as what would you call it, acclaimed as Raiders. Yeah. Just 2 nominations for this: Best Original Score, Best Visuals, and it won for Best Visual Effects, which is, I guess it probably all came to the heart stuff, maybe. And what I would say for the alligator sequence, I always like, again, it's like, when you watch those films, which is the early days of CGI, it still looks remarkable when you've got the bodies falling off the bridge, because we know that it's so obvious, because we know that's the inception of that technology. And again, when it's in a film like Star Wars, where you're in fictional planets, that stuff looks easier. But when you've got it in the real world, obviously you're going to notice it more. But I thought it looked fine. But again, I can see why it won that award. And I guess what's sort of adding, we sort of, I guess we've already sort of done this, but just mention about how this one was perceived today. As we said, this film hasn't been cancelled. We both still like this film. Maybe it wasn't as good for us this time around. It's not because of what we just said, though. I just think that I've appreciated the quality in Raiders a lot more than I had previously. But I don't think this is a film that, again, has been lambasted, that's been battered. It's just very interesting reading what people have said over the years. And I'm going to be very curious for Indy 5 next year to see what discourse comes up. Not that I need every film to have this, did you know about X, Y, and Z, but it was kind of like Matrix. Actually, like watching the first 2 Matrix was really fascinating, seeing like how not just tech advance, but the whole like trans stuff and everything with the first Matrix film. It was written at the time in that way, just that no one really understood it until the last few years, when it's been more obvious. And obviously the sad irony that they're far alt-right now with all the weird pill shit and all those absolute psychopaths. So I don't think you'll have anything as deep as that for Temple of Doom, but is there anything you want to kind of add to that part?
So it's still regarded reasonably high, because obviously back in the day we wouldn't have had Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb scores, and everything like that. It's at 84% Rotten Tomatoes, and it's at 7.5 on IMDb. Those are very high scores. Like, those are surprisingly high scores for this film. I don't know if I would have given this film a 7.5 out of 10 or anything like that. Maybe closer to a 7, but like, even in that sense, it's still regarded really, really well amongst loads of people, and people have fond memories of this film all the way back. I haven't seen anyone really commenting online about these things. I know that some people have been talking about it and stuff like that. And once you watch the film or rewatch the film again, you do start to realize, and you do start to question, this isn't the best kind of look for this film and everything like that. But it doesn't seem to have affected its kind of reviews. People still see it quite fondly, and people still enjoy it.
No, I'm kind of with you on that, and I think that kind of leans into my thoughts on a lot of the film as well. That it's still very, very enjoyable. We have kept saying that tonight. I think you get some films as you get older that just don't work at all for you, but this isn't one of those. You know that sort of meme you line that's like the fear of watching the films you grew up with in case you hate them all. Because I'd imagine there are so many terrible ones. I'm just too scared to go back and watch them because I think I know what I'd think. But we've not really spoke about any sort of direct scenes specific. Just sort of any favorite scene or something. I mean, the opening scene to me is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Not just the. I mean, what's fascinating is the whole opening of the song. Obviously, Spielberg's only just done his first musical, but what that shows is that he was capable of directing a musical his entire life, and I cannot believe it took till 2021 to get his first outright musical. But also one of my favorite ever references, of course, it is at Club Obi-Wan, which is like, yeah, I'd love it. Great timing.
I can never hold the opening scene as high regard as the original opening scene in Raiders because that is so iconic. But my favorite scene, I think this will be the same for a lot of people, is Kalimar. Just because I remember like chatting with my friends about this film, we're just going to go Kalimar to each other and stuff like that, and do the whole heart beating thing and kind of pretending to take it out of each other's chest. I remember that quite fondly. That's a great scene. But I do also like the scene on the bridge before he cuts it down, where he's surrounded, and you can just see the intent in kind of Harrison Ford's eyes, where he's like, "We'll see each other again." Like, and it's just like he's completely willing to sacrifice kind of like loads of people to get out of that situation. Yeah. And it's just that's the one scene where I actually enjoyed Willie Scott's reaction. It's the one scene because she's like, "Oh, fuck's sake," and just starts wrapping her hands around the vines.
I think it's so. That's like one of like if you look at films like defining images, I feel like him on the bridge is like the defining not image of Temple of Doom, but if you were going to get a Temple of Doom autograph from Harrison Ford, that's the one you'd do. I was going to say, as you said, the defining image is probably Kalimar, just the imagery, the whole concept, everything, and all that stuff. But I mentioned the opening. I just love the whole. Is it Lao Che? I've forgotten what they're called, but one of the funniest jokes ever done, which is the "See you soon," says the name, shuts the door, and it's their company. But it's that stereotype of like the laughing gangsters, that just that whole opening scene, the back and forth, and the death by kebab has always been to me one of the most incredible things ever. Like, how do you get killed by a kebab? I don't care, but I think it's just phenomenal. I've always loved it, and it's really creepy because like his body's just like shooting the gun like a robot going off. But sorry to keep going at the opening. The Minecart Chase, I think it's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. I'm not as big on it as a lot of other people. That's nothing to do with the quality of this. I think you kind of said it for me earlier. The thing that wowed me was pod racing when I was young, and there's a reason I'm really big on Formula One, and I think it's honestly down to pod racing. Maybe one day it will be real. Who knows? But the bridge stuff, and again, another really funny gag is the repeat of the first film. Goes to shoot them, but doesn't have the gun. Phenomenal. So such an easy thing to do, and it's rightfully done. Not for the sake of it, not the exact same carbon copy as one, but this is two, and it's just it's still very funny. I think that's what Spielberg does so well. Like, he has this charm to how he shoots his films, that he can add in a bit of comedy, add in a bit of horror, but the core of it, you're still going to get the story that comes to fruition. So, any other scenes I feel like we're missing? I don't really know.
I think that covers it for me, at least with the scenes that I enjoyed with the film. But if you want to know what my kind of final thoughts are, it's good to reflect on the film from a modern perspective. I still enjoyed the film, but once again, like we said in this review, there are things that we need to kind of consider about discussing about this film. Doesn't distract away from the fact that I did enjoy some parts of it, not as much as I used to when I was a kid. There are still some points which I don't enjoy as much, like Willie's character, but you can always go back and enjoy Short Round. So, yeah.
No, I'm kind of with you. Looking back from a modern thing, I think is important. I don't think you can avoid discussing it. This is a retrospective. We are doing a retrospective in 2022. and it is fine to have that discussion. I'm glad we have. Obviously, maybe we should have had an additional person on, which is on me. But I'd be curious to what other people do think. So please do comment as well. If you're from I'd be really curious if you're from an Indian background. Just comment your thoughts on this film. I'm just very curious. But aside from that, I still love this film. It's one of my, I'm not gonna say one of my favorite Spielberg films because you could say that about like half of his films. But it is still a lot of fun for me. It was great to revisit it. Now, really frustrating. They're releasing the 4K steelbooks for each film at the moment, but the Raiders isn't coming out till the end of June, and this one's the end of July, and I'm guessing you're going to get end of August and September, so it's really unsynced to what we're doing it. But I just think Temple of Doom is a lot of fun, and for a prequel, something that goes dark, it tests the characters, it's kind of what you need. And I think if you're watching them as a trilogy, it's so, because it's not a carbon copy of one, it really helps on a rewatch to get to 3. I don't feel like I've seen the same film 3 times. It's kind of like, you're sort of there with Raiders, you take a step back for Temple of Doom, and then you're going to go for a sprint when you get to Last Crusade, which is a really sort of fascinating way of approaching it in Mr. Trilogy. So, yeah, a lot of time for this film. Love this film, and you mentioned our short round. Short round to me is the heart, the beating heart of this film, and I think without him, this film wouldn't work. So, kudos to that. And I guess that's going to wrap up our review. Go and see Everything Ever All at Once at the cinema, please. I'll say it again, and that's the last time we'll plug it on today's video. And Top Gun, when that's out this week. We've already got one review on the channel for that, but do see both of those. I'm curious too. But that is going to, as I said, round out our review on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Please comment your thoughts on the film, your history with it, all that kind of stuff. We'll reply to those comments as they come in. We love having these discussions with you. And please hit that like button. It makes a lot of fun. A lot of people checking out our stuff. We've picked up some new subs recently. If you've enjoyed our other stuff, some of our more modern reviews, obviously we're doing the Spielberg Retrospective every Tuesday. So hit the subscribe button. It won't be going away. Don't have too long to wait till the next one either. But Tate, where can the people find us and what is coming next?
The people can find us absolutely everywhere. So if you go onto Twitter, that's at cinema_savvy. Go onto Facebook, that is cinema savvy, and go onto letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. Also go into the description and pick up a t-shirt from TeePublic.
As I said, people, please do that at home. And I guess we could say we mentioned the Steven Spielberg Retrospective around every Tuesday. The next one is The Color Purple, going up Tuesday the 31st of May, a film I've never seen and know nothing about. Now, we'll have a bit more details near the time, but this is a chance this might be the first live episode of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective so far. We've been filming them so far in advance recently. We've had a bit of a nice quiet break. Come back for Indiana Jones, obviously Color Purple. We'll have more discussion on that, so please do. And just taking it forward at what else is coming on the Indiana Jones retrospective. Just looking ahead, look at that. We have The Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, a film I've also not seen, which I've heard some fantastic stuff about. We'll have Tom on for that one. The film Always, which I didn't know existed, which looks like I'm trying to get recruited into being a Christian or something based off that poster. That's going to be in June. And then we get to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with none other than Sean Connery. Oh, that is going to be exciting. I'm not going to rub it in your face, Tate. I know you are going away soon, but we'll see how many of these we can get you on for. That's the main thing. But as I said, everybody, thank you for all your comments, for that kind of stuff. We're going to very quickly go over a few more things other than Indiana Jones. Kind of said earlier, we've had reviews out for Everything Ever All at Once. We've had reviews out for Top Gun. We've kind of dedicated May as being our Star Wars month for this year. We've been building up to the return of Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I guess we can say, at the time this video going up, we are 3 days away from Kenobi. The first time seeing Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi in 17 years. Yes, this is not a drill. This is real. We're going to have a spoiler discussion up this Friday in the evening, live at 8 p.m. More details on the day. Because this week isn't just about Kenobi for Star Wars. It's Star Wars Celebration. Kickstarting on Thursday, running through to Sunday night. It's over in Anaheim. We're going to have videos up for some of the big panels if they're needed for discussions, all that kind of stuff. We mentioned Kenobi. We probably say again, get us on our social medias because we do have a reporter on the ground in the name of Tate's sister. Adina is there. And any post we can put, we'll have on there. So social media, we always say, get us on socials. We've been far more active. We had the Kenobi Q&A on there last week at the press conference. It is worth following us. But again, if you're a fan of Star Wars, fan of Indiana Jones, you don't have to go too far away for either of those to come back in the coming weeks. So please do all of that. And as always, any other announcements, reviews, last minute stuff, we'll let you know on our social media feeds. So thank you all for coming, for joining us tonight, and be sure to join us on the next one. Take care.